The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Payan. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we have Joe Dowling, CEO of CV Sciences, the makers of Plus CBD and the #1 top-selling brand of hemp-derived CBD in the United States, on our show today. Joe, welcome. I'm really excited to talk with you and geek out a little. So thank you for being on the show.
Oh, man, I'm so excited to be here, Sara. Thank you.
So the first question I always ask my guests is, what was your first cannabis experience?
Gee, that's Well, I think the most personal. I might answer differently than some. We all had experience going back to our youth and through college and so forth, and perhaps even into present times, depending on what the use case is. But I think for me, uh, in many ways, the most personal experience that I had or have had is when one of my younger brothers had cancer, and the pain medication that was prescribed, the side effects were so awful that he, the side effects, just absolutely made him worse. And the only way that he could get relief, and he did this outside of the sort of the care of the doctors, because this was about, I don't know, 25 years ago now. Cannabis was the only thing that would give him relief. And and this is at a very different time from, a legal standpoint that we have now. So here's, my brother who's in and out of the hospital and, under the care of physicians and being treated with all kinds of, toxic chemicals and pain medication. And when he, get an opportunity to get in a wheelchair and, go outside, he would, have cannabis, and it was the only thing that gave him relief. And just watching that and experiencing that, and he eventually didn't make it, but watching that, you just kind of, take on a whole new view of cannabis, whether it's for medical or even for recreational purposes. And that was such a personal thing to watch him, get some relief during a very, very difficult time. So that's, may not be the first time, but it was the most, sort of, I guess, compelling experience. And it wasn't even an experience that I had, other than to watch someone else, a brother of mine that actually got relief from cannabis. And so anyhow, that would be the way I would react to that. So
I mean, that's really impactful. And it is, one of the things that I talk about as a cancer survivor myself, but also as somebody who works with people going through their journeys with cancer, is that, family members are survivors as well. You may not have physically gone through this experience, but emotionally you are, and you're witnessing what's going on with your family member. And I think that's one of the reasons that legalization is such an important thing, and to not forget the impact of medicinal use, because like here, I'm in the Bay Area, and, we were like the hot spot for the AIDS epidemic. And, whether somebody had HIV or cancer or something else that could be positively impacted by using cannabis therapeutically for symptom management, people were having to put themselves in dangerous situations to get what they needed, either for themselves or their loved ones. And so it's so nice to see that we have access not only safely to products, so that you're not having to go, if you're lucky, you have somebody in your life that's was able to provide it for you. But if you weren't, you'd have to put yourself in a dangerous situation. Yeah. But also now with the rules around testing and things like that, that the products are safe as well.
Completely agree. Yeah. This is at a time the story that I'm relating to you is at a time when, legalization, wasn't what it is now. And
right.
You did put yourself at risk, and it was, all black market. And like you said, you couldn't guarantee the safety or really ensure the safety like we do today. So we've made a huge strides in that area, and I think it, like you said, it really brings into focus the need for deregulate or de legalization of cannabis, and so we've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, we certainly have. And I was looking at your background, and you come from the wellness industry, and it looks like you have a lot of experience in biotech and finance. So you've had a really rich career. What brought you into working in hemp and CBD?
It's kind of a funny story, actually, and I've told this a few times, but I was in biotech prior to getting into the hemp space 10 years ago, and we had sold our company, and I was as part of that, there was a transition period, but then that ended, and I was looking for what I was going to do next, and a recruiter contacted me about this opportunity, and it really didn't fit with 10 years ago. It really didn't fit with my resume. And I, just thought, that's not something I'm going to be interested in. And I have to blame my wife, who said, no, you have to go at least check it out and hear it out. And the paradox behind that is that my wife was a DOJ attorney. And right. And so that's kind of a funny story. Anyhow, I ended up pursuing it, and it was such a unique opportunity with a company that was committed to science and wasn't operating in the shadows, and was committed to doing things right and helping to mainstream a product that desperately needed it. And so with that, I jumped into the abyss. So,
Isn't it funny? I totally get that, because I always tell people, if you told me 13 years ago I'd be working in this, I tell you were nuts. But then you start to get into the work and you see the benefits and what the impact that, and that's part of the thing that we that's why this podcast exists, is to have more conversations about that, to turn people on to the possibilities and to erase the stigma. And then you get immersed in it and you're like, oh, okay.
Right. And as science continues to evolve and emerge, it gets even more exciting. I remember when I told my mom what I was doing, she, kind of digested what I told her, and she looked at me and she was thinking about what to say. And she could only come up with this, which was, "So are you selling pot?" And no, that's not that's not what I'm doing. But at some point, anyhow, it generally, just from one generation to the next, it's kind of funny to see the reaction. And over time, though, she really understood it. So.
Yeah, it's a learning curve. I know for me, with my family, I had the excuse of, they're like, "Oh, she just got done with cancer. She's having a crisis. We'll just let her do whatever she's gonna do. We're just glad she's alive."
That's right. We'll let this little episode slide.
Exactly. And then, as you start to get more into it, and they realize that, oh, wow, there's more to it than this. It's really interesting to see the conversations that happen. Like I used to get nervous when I would go to family events, because I had some very some very straight edge relatives, but then they were like they were coming up to me and they're like, "That's fascinating. Talk to me about CBD. I saw Dr. Gupta sing, and I want to talk more about this." And I always say conversations normalization. And getting into CBD, tell our listeners more about CV Sciences and what you're doing.
So CV Sciences was formed back over 10 years ago now, and commercial operations really began in 2013, kind of 2014, and our first branded product was really introduced in kind of mid to late 2014 and first got on the shelf at the end of 2014. So that was kind of a big, uh, milestone in the history of the company to actually get on a retail shelf with this, product that has all kinds of stigma associated with it. And then that was followed by, the second and 50th and 100th shelf over time. But, the whole point of CV Sciences from the very beginning was as a health and wellness company, and using CBD as a supplement, and especially the emerging science that was coming along with it to really help patients achieve greater health and wellness for many different need states. And so that was really the foundation of the company, and it's still true today.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful thing. I think in the cannabis industry, where we're having more conversations about THC, I think that's one of the things that a lot of the industry is missing out on. There are people who are talking about, oh, cannabis sells itself. We have this particular consumer that we cater to, but we aren't able to be sustainable. What's going on? Why aren't we having the sales that we want? And I think one of the biggest things that they're missing is actually having that thoughtful approach about wellness and plant medicine when we talk about whether we're calling it hemp or cannabis, because there are a lot of people that are very interested, especially in this time where, people are getting more into nutraceuticals and particularly adaptogens, and, hemp has a very adaptogenic nature about it as far as creating balance in the body. And so having more of those conversations about how well it works with the human body. Not everybody. Like I always say, even though we create our own endogenous cannabinoids, not all of us do well with phytocannabinoids, and that's all right. And I think that that's a good conversation to have too, because it affects policy. As I've talked with many of my guests about the fact that I think as human beings, when something doesn't work well for us, we end up becoming evangelists for why it didn't work for us, so it shouldn't work for other people. But the stories that you hear about people using, especially the non-euphoric cannabinoids, to create balance, not necessarily like as a cure for anything by any stretch of the imagination, but creating balance and using it therapeutically and for symptom management is so incredibly rich and valuable for many people. And when you have different, now how many different products do you have?
Oh gosh, it's probably in the 50 range, our whole portfolio. It varies. We discontinue things occasionally and we add things occasionally. So it hovers around 50 to 60.
And how are you feeling as far as the progression of, like, I know that the Farm Bill is going to be coming up again, and we're having a lot of conversations, especially about synthesized cannabinoids and people selling THCA flower, which I'm always kind of like, we're not having, we're not having the conversation about what happens after you light it up. But what are some of your thoughts around that, and what are you excited about?
Well, I'm really excited about the prospect of regulation. I mean, I don't think there are too many industries that are begging to be regulated. We're certainly one of them. It's not real sustainable. I think what you're seeing with, some of the creative, I'll call them creative, derivatives that are coming out, whether they're synthetic or plant-based, and how they're, sort of being used under the definition of the 2018 Farm Bill is a reflection of the fact that there's just been no activity in terms of a regulatory framework, and that's likely going to continue until there is one. And so I don't think there's anyone except for the people that are benefiting from some of the exotic cannabinoids that are being introduced in big ways into the market that are against that. So we desperately need regulation. We really do. It's going to hurt some people, but it will help the industry and it's going to help consumers, because I think it's going to force the people that are really committed to quality and safety and science to come forward and to be able to, do things responsibly. And so, a sensible, regulatory framework is desperately needed. I will go back to your comments before this question, though, when you were talking about CBD and kind of using it for homeostasis and balancing the body. And it's important for, I think, anybody in the cannabis space generally, or if you're, involved in the hemp industry, to go back to the development of Epidiolex, which was approved in June of 2018 as a drug to treat two rare forms of pediatric epilepsy. And if you think about a difficult, medical condition to treat, that's certainly one of them. And if you think about concerns over safety, anytime you're treating children, that's even, more of a concern. And yet here's a plant-based drug that, went all the way through clinical studies and was approved by the FDA at doses that are extremely high compared to what you get on the shelf in a supplement. So that just shows you the power of the cannabis plant, and in particular CBD being used as a therapeutic, for a very serious medical condition. So that's a really exciting thing, even though there haven't been, other or many other, drugs that have been approved by FDA utilizing CBD or THC. So I like to, remind everybody of that it has been done. It's been done in a big way. And, it I think is an important milestone in cannabis generally to always remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's it's so important that we have that, because there is a lot of research out there, but a lot of the things when we're talking about symptom management are more around storytelling and people's experiences. Like, I've worked with a lot of people who have been able to take themselves off of things like benzodiazepines and opiates, being able to replace it with using, either CBD rich formulations or sometimes THC rich formulations in the case of opiates. And I know for myself, going through my cancer journey, as a stage 3 colon cancer patient, having something that would create other complications like, opiates or anti-nausea medicines, which could have complicated my personal the type of cancer that I was going through, being able to use cannabis in lieu of that was actually a much safer option. And and then just kind of delving into the science itself, because as I was saying, people always say there isn't enough research. Well, we actually do have much more than people can even probably get their heads around. But you're doing some interesting research at CV Sciences, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just add on to what you said,
Yeah.
and then I'll talk a little bit about the research that we've done. It's interesting. We have, because we've been around for 10 years with our flagship Plus CBD brand, we have so much anecdotal evidence and so much anecdotal, kind of feedback from customers, and so we know what people are, the benefits they're receiving from taking our CBD products. And the need states, I think, kind of, for the most part, are around pain, anxiety, and sleep. And if you just think about those three areas, I think all of us at one time or another, have pain or, have anxiety or struggle with sleep. And you think about the ability to treat those in a more natural way, as opposed to doing it with, very toxic prescription drugs or other ways like alcohol, or however you're going to choose to do it. And if you can somehow, address those need states, whether it's CBD or, a combination of CBD and perhaps low dose THC, it's surprising how helpful that can be with, any age, really, someone trying to sleep. And we all know how restorative good sleep is, and just that one thing, if you could, get a good night's sleep, boy, oh boy, that is, a health and wellness plan all by itself. So anyway, we have, while these are not clinical studies, it's a great body of evidence that we think is important to consider as well. As legalization improves, I think you're going to see more investment dollars go into research. But right now, because the regulatory pathway is so uncertain, it's hard to get investment into the space because of that. Not impossible, but it's harder. So we've done when going back to kind of 2017, 2018, when Epidiolex was going through their final approval process with FDA, we were looking at that saying, boy, that is super exciting. And we actually acquired some technology to utilize CBD in combination with nicotine as a smoking cessation drug. And we actually did all of the preclinical toxicology and pharmacology work to support opening up a phase 1 clinical study with FDA. So we've actually done, sort of the more standard approach right through the front door of the FDA, per se, and where you do all the work to get to the point where you can actually put it into a human. So that's really exciting. We paused the development of that for financial reasons. We have issued patents in the U.S., Canada, Australia, and I think 8 EU countries, and so we're poised to resume that at some point. But it's very exciting for us to potentially participate kind of in the RX side of advancing the usefulness of CBD as a treatment.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially because even though I said before, there is a lot of research out there. There are different things that come into play when we look at research, like the quality of the substance that's being used in the research. Because as we know, like with the old government program with cannabis, that I've talked to some of the patients, and what they were getting was was subpar at best in those tins, and to have like a real quality resource for the research is huge. And also looking at what the pool is of the public that's involved in the research. Like who are you testing? How big is that pool? Because one of the biggest things with some of the early research is that it was done with rats, and as we know in research, it's usually male rats that are included in that pool of study. So we don't get a real good read on how, those of us who are born female, how it would affect us.
Sure, right. It's always good to know sort of the impact on, reproduction and so forth. So those are pretty basic, endpoints that are needed to, go forward to make sure that you're not going to do any harm like that when you actually have human studies. So
yeah,
absolutely right.
And it's interesting to see, because I just see like the growing of the industry, and there's been we're coming together, but there was a little bit of a disconnect in the beginning because we had a lot of talented people in the industry that didn't necessarily have the business chops or the background in a non-cannabis field to bring that talent to the table. And now we're seeing so many people like yourself who are coming with your expertise that you're able to lend to an industry, and seeing how these are all kind of working together to create a richer environment for great products, stronger companies, better outreach, better research. With your experience, especially in biotech and finance, what are some of the things that you've been really excited to bring to the table to this industry?
Well, I mean, you want to bring a real grown-up approach, right? Where you're professionalizing something that, and it's not to say that it wasn't professional before, because I think a lot of the people that, were forced to operate in the black market were really quite good at what they did. And
Yeah.
there's no reason, or it's not necessary to disparage them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of them are still in the space and do fine. But I think the category, the cannabis category broadly, really did need people that came from, I hate to say this because it sounds horrible, but corporate training and background in operations and finance and science and in every way possible. If the industry is truly going to be legitimate and grow and considered to be safe and of high quality, all those things needed to happen. Also, it's very difficult to attract institutional investors if you don't have those things in place. Institutional investors like structure. They like legal structure. They like adherence to that. They like oversight. They like all those kind of things. It gives them comfort that the investment has some sustainability. And so with the industry not being able to sort of achieve, whether it's cannabis or the hemp-based industry, achieve some kind of legal framework that everybody, including investors, are comfortable with, that it's going to govern the industry, institutional investors go away, and that is really hurting the cannabis industry. It's hurting the hemp industry. You don't have to go back too many years to look at the major public cannabis companies and kind of look at the high of their market cap or the stock price, and then today look at the low. And during the high period, there was institutional investor involvement with the hope that there was going to be a regulatory response from the government, and it just hasn't happened. And so you're watching institutional investors, and we watch institutional investors flee the space. So we've got to get back to the point where they come back and provide some stability for investors, and the space to grow again. And so anyhow, that's the goal from the beginning was, let's make this institutionally relevant, and doing that requires all the things that I just described. Make it a legit industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was so glad to hear you say that it's, the people who were involved beforehand do have business chops, but we need people with all sorts of experience to create a stronger industry and stronger companies. And I think it also will help with the conversation, because I think a lot of people, when they were first starting to invest, even 6 years ago, I'd be at a gathering and somebody would come up to me and they'd be like, I want to know what I should invest in. Tell me what companies I should invest in.
Right. Yeah.
And, one of the hardest things for people to understand, and I think part of it was because it was a new industry, and there was it still smacked a little bit of the stigma, as it does still today.
Yeah.
But people thought it was a get rich quick thing. And the one thing I would always tell people, and I think now with the way companies are becoming more structured and just more being able to live in this world of, capitalism where we're at, to be able to survive, they're understanding that it's more of a long game, because a lot of companies went under when investors came to call for their money, because these investors didn't understand that it was going to take time.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So and I think people are a little afraid of maybe someone like me coming in and saying, oh, we need all this structure, and we need to legitimize, and we need to have adults in the room. All that kind of probably is a little scary to somebody that has been in it for 20 years or 30 years and, operated in the black market and did it very effectively and did it very well. I think there's room for that still. But the industry, to scale properly, like any other category, if you want to think of it that way, has to really bring, sort of a professional structure to it. And it doesn't mean that it crowds out, sort of the craft, operators. I think there's always going to be a need for that. I mean, if you want to think of an analogy, you can, think of the beer industry, and you're watching Tilray invest heavily in the beer industry is probably as a hedge to, a bridge to the time when cannabis is, has better legal framework. But, the beer industry is dominated by 4 or 5 different companies, but there's thousands of craft brewers in every city across the US. And I think the same kind of thing can happen in the cannabis industry, where inevitably I think you're going to see contraction and consolidation, and and it's already happening where and I kind of include the hemp category in the broader cannabis category. There's going to be contraction. There will be consolidation. There will be, and I'll just use a number, half a dozen bigger companies that have, market share. And I'm making these numbers up, of 80% or 70%. And then the rest is going to be open, and should be, to, really clever and craft operators that are innovative and that can thrive. And so I think that's where it's headed. And I think it probably needs to get there in order, again, to attract institutional investors. They like that kind of a market, of a category to invest in. It has, sustainability. It has consistency, and those are the kind of things that investors look for.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I'm really excited to see the time where we see more of that. When I look at that, I think about when we're finally allowed to do interstate commerce. Mm-hmm. And having these, and I think there's more education to be done about it, but these wonderful outdoor growers. Yep. That, I was just in Arizona last week, and just, because I always ask this when I go into a dispensary and I forget about my privilege of being a Californian, I'm like, do you have any outdoor grown cannabis? And of course they said no. And I thought about it, and I was like, I guess you couldn't. Not in Arizona. Even if you were allowed to, you wouldn't be able to because of the climate.
Right.
And and even though having it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't want to make the comparison with alcohol, but it's the closest thing that we have. Yeah, but when we look at like wine, like I'm originally from Michigan. There is wine in Michigan.
Right.
But if I, and there's some interesting stuff, but if I'm to choose between something that's from like, Napa Valley or Sonoma, or even going up into Washington and Oregon, I'm probably going to be choosing that over something that's out of Michigan. But there's still the opportunity with the indoor grows and things like that. But it probably won't be leaving the state. It will probably be a more localized sell.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting to just kind of see how everything's evolving? I couldn't have told you like 10 years ago, looking into my crystal ball, that we would evolve the way that we have, and just all the interesting people who are bringing their talents to this work to create not only, companies that are supporting, communities and creating generational wealth, but also just the innovations in the different products and the outreach and the way that the public is starting to see cannabis, and in some ways, and hemp in some ways, embrace it more than they have before. Because when I first started, I had a lot of friends that were like, well, that's interesting. Not interested at all. And now all of a sudden they're like,
Right.
My husband's been using CBD for sleep. What do you think?
Right. Yep. No, I agree. I think it's going to evolve even more, and I think we can have even more honest conversations than kind of what we're poking around the edges here on. And I think it's going to come from, younger, millennial and below that, because they are, the trends are very clear. They're moving away from alcohol, and they're, moving towards cannabis use for and the need state can simply be for, light recreational use. And so that is a trend that is not going away. I think a lot of people are saying, whether I'm going to, use a little or a lot or none of alcohol, I will probably, bring some form of cannabis into my, health and wellness, and perhaps even, my social life as well. And so I think you're seeing products, and you'll continue to see products that are going to innovate to address that very situation.
Yeah, because we need to have products that we actually see ourselves using
Right.
instead of, something that's completely new. Like people used to say, oh, like, yeah, cannabis or weed. They're like, I don't smoke. I don't do any of that. I'm like, no, totally understand. But during the pandemic, my husband and I would entertain in our garden. And because, you want to keep it outdoors.
Sure.
And
Right.
we would bring out low dose cannabis beverages, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
had friends who hadn't like done anything since college, and I was like, it's 2 milligrams, and they're like,
Right.
oh, take a little sip, and now when they come over,
Yeah.
they're like, I don't keep it at home because I've got the kids, but do you have any of those beverages? Like, let's
Right.
let's
Right.
do that.
Yeah, no, much like that's a very good alternative to alcohol. The same is true in using, cannabis, hemp, et cetera, for, other need states that we've talked about earlier, whether it's, sleep issues or anxiety or pain. And so, the opportunity for the category, for the product, for these ingredients, however you want to think of them, it is much more significant than where we are today.
Yeah, and we learn new things every day, which is what I love about our work. And speaking of learning things new every day, what are your thoughts on the future of the hemp-derived CBD industry? Where do you think we'll go? What kind of innovations are you excited about? The possibilities.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be a category. I am excited about the opportunity for further research. I think we have so much, just feedback from consumers over the years, which is why we, like to think of this as, addressing very specific need states. You cannot make those claims on the packages because they're just that we don't have the sufficient science to support that yet. So that will be exciting over time to be able to do further research to where we can make claims and really have an understanding of dose response. Because right now it's a little bit, if 15 milligrams is good, then 50 has got to be a lot better. And if 50 is good, then wow, 100 is even better. And so that's not the best way to approach, sort of a dose response for any ingredient or any drug for that matter. And so I really look forward to the future where we have a pretty good understanding of, sort of concentration and proper dosing and levels that are safe and therapeutic at the same time. And so, and good alternatives and good options for, the need states, the use cases that we're talking about.
Yeah, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. I always tell people, even though CBD won't get you high,
Yep,
why take more than you need? And,
that's
and
right.
when I work with a lot of clients that are especially in states that do not have cannabis available, or because of their job, like my brother-in-law works for the state, or actually he works for the county, and so they don't allow THC in their systems. And
Yep.
so he's been using CBD by itself to help with sleep and pain, so that he doesn't have any issues around that. But one of the things that I always talk to people about when they're looking to identify a good brand to work with is certificates of analysis.
Yep.
And a good company will be able to provide those. And what are your thoughts on certificates of analysis and just like how to pick out the brand that will work well for you?
So I think there's a couple of things. I remember when I think it was the state of Indiana, this was back in I think 2017 or 18, they mandated QR codes on the packaging and with a link to the certificate of analysis from the QR code. And so we were actually the very first company to incorporate a QR code onto our packaging way back then with that link to our C of A. So I think that's that's basic table stakes. I think for anybody looking at, gee, is this a brand I can trust? Is this a brand that I can be comfortable is safe, and that what's in the bottle and on the outside on the label match up, and that's been verified by an outside laboratory. The only way to do that is to make sure that you're getting it from a brand you recognize, that you can go look at the C of A and really be comfortable that all those things are there, and that what you're buying and what's inside the packaging is actually what is advertised. And so that because in my neighborhood, every once in a while we'll get together with friends, and I'll inevitably run into somebody that, oh, have you ever heard of this brand? No, I've never heard of that brand. Oh yeah, it's my buddy, and he's got a friend, and making it in the garage, and it's helped me so much with this or that or the other thing, and it's I'm very polite and say, where does it come from? Where is it made? Do you understand what GMP is? Do you understand what testing is? And on and on. And the answer to all those questions are all no, most of the time. So, I think you have to be careful. I'm not saying that, a local small producer can't do things right, but it's hard and it's expensive to do things right. And so, but you have to look for, is this a company that operates under GMP? Can you get quick access to a certificate of analysis, and does it match up with what's on the label?
Yeah, because I think one of the things that people don't understand, because when you see it packaged, you separate yourself from the fact that it's a plant. I think a lot of people don't see that. Yep. And whether we're talking about hemp or cannabis, it's a very efficient bioaccumulator. So whatever it's grown in or around, it leaches into that product. Will suck it up. Yep. Which is why, years ago they planted hemp in Chernobyl. It's like an amazing experiment that further proved the efficiency. Yeah. But when I was looking at your bio, and I was noticing that there was this GRAS certification, and I don't know what that is. What is that?
I think when people in the cannabis space first heard, gee, we're GRAS certified, they probably thought, well, of course you are. And, kind of tongue in cheek, but no, GRAS is an acronym that means generally recognized as safe. And it's a pathway available at the FDA, within the FDA regulations, where you can achieve safety in your product in allowing you to go to market. We can't go through the front door of the FDA and go through a very formal process with the ingredient or the plant, because the regulations don't exist. Mm-hmm. So you're stuck with doing it on your own. Which is what we did, which is called a self-affirmed GRAS, where you don't go through the front door of the FDA and do it very formally with them, but you do it on your own. And what's required is you do all the toxicity studies, similar to what you do in a drug development pathway, to determine, that you're dealing with a safe ingredient. In our case, it would be CBD. And you do some dose ranging studies to determine sort of a safe level of concentration for human consumption. And so we did all of those studies in the 2016-17 timeframe, before anybody in the industry knew what GRAS meant or what self-affirmed GRAS was all about. And you're required to not only do the studies, but then you have to have all the studies peer-reviewed. Then you have to publish it. And that's not easy to do all those things. And not everyone wants to publish the results. So it's a very rigorous process. We published in, I think it was August of 2018. And so at that point, we became self-affirmed GRAS certified. And so when, we're talking to bigger retail customers that are trying to assess, gee, is this company legit? Are they GMP? Do they do things right? Can we trust these guys? We can show them toxicology studies that we did. We can show them the published results of our studies that were done independent of us. And so that was pretty persuasive. Other bigger companies followed. Companies that are well known in the hemp space followed us and did the same thing, but it took them a couple years behind us. So no, that was we think a huge achievement for the industry, and really gets back to kind of what I said earlier in the podcast, which was, when I joined the company, there was a strong commitment to science and a strong commitment to doing things correctly, and that was an example of that.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge because, like you said, it's not a light undertaking. There's a lot of heavy lifting that goes into that.
Yeah, and it's expensive. And there's no guarantee. It's sort of like, any biotech company or, any company in our space that is going to go down kind of a drug development pathway. There's no guarantee of success. It may not work. It may not be effective. It may not be any more effective than something else that's out there. So, we weren't guaranteed that, gee, this is going to be safe.
Yeah.
So it's a risk. You have to be willing to invest, it can be up to $1 million to get this done.
And it also illustrates your commitment to care.
I agree. It does. Yep.
So you were mentioning that I know that your products are very popular, but for our listeners who may want to experience them, where can they purchase them?
So there's two ways. We have very good distribution in retail channels, and primarily in what I'll kind of refer to as the natural product retail channel. And if, here in California, you're in the Bay Area, you're familiar with stores like Sprouts and Jimbo's, and Whole Foods is not in the category in any significant way yet. But that's our primary B2B sales channel. So you can really buy our products in, sort of direct in all 50 states, primarily in natural type stores. They can be independent stores, or they can be, larger, maybe 100 store type operations regionally throughout the country that are really focused on natural products, organic products, vegan products, et cetera. And so they typically have very good sort of supplement offerings, and we're carried in virtually all of those type of stores throughout the country. We're in about 4,000 B2B locations throughout the U.S. Alternatively, we have a very robust B2C e-commerce operation as well, and that our website is either at cbsciences.com, but probably more easily at pluscbdoil.com. So pluscbdoil.com, and that's our primary e-commerce operation. So either place, you can buy our products and kind of see what we're up to, and you can also, there's great links to science that we've been involved with, or that is out there that we've kind of put together as a compendium on our website. So there's a lot to see and read by going there as well.
Awesome. And if people want to follow you on social media, do you have accounts that they can look at as well?
Yeah, so we're on all the media platforms, so we're very present out there. So if you want to join that, that's available too, whether it's Instagram or Facebook. And so you can certainly use that as an option as well.
Joe, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. And you're doing some really exciting stuff. And it's so wonderful to connect with another professional in the industry that is really pushing to have things done correctly so that we can have nice things.
Well, I enjoy, one, enjoy, and then two, achieve greater health. I mean, that, so let's not, rule out either, or, make them mutually exclusive, because I think they can go hand in hand. And I think whether it is for enjoyment, you can certainly, use that as a way to greater health as well. So I'm excited right along with you.
And I just really, enjoy, well, the entire conversation, but your realistic approach, your professionalism, your compassion, and I'm really excited to see what you do in the future. And I'm really excited about our future conversations too. So please come back
Yeah.
anytime.
Well, gosh, thank you for having me. It's been a joy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.